Hi everyone, I'm Jonas. I'm the head of Tenity in Asia. I'm really here today to talk about Southeast Asia's FinTech ecosystem, and especially I want to really talk about FinTech and the trends, developments of the past few years in terms of VC funding especially. But maybe for those that haven't heard about Tenity yet, that's pretty okay for me because we just rebranded 2 weeks ago. We used to be called F10, and now we have Tenity. Same company, same passion, new brand. Quick introduction about us. We are really creating the future of banking and insurance. We're founded in 2015 with the vision to become a leading global innovation ecosystem for the financial services industry. And we believe the magic happens when incumbents meet startups. So we're really a strong believer in matching those up to really shape the future of banking and insurance. We are located across 4 hubs. Personally, I've grown up in Switzerland, maybe you can hear it, not from Singapore, but I live in Singapore since 3 years, so we have hubs in Switzerland, in Singapore. We are also in the Nordics, in Stockholm, Nordics and Baltics, and we also have a hub in Spain. And for me, looking after Asia Pacific, we look at startups from across the region. So we incubate startups and match startups with incumbents from across the entire region. Of course, there is a bigger focus on Southeast Asia. We are a true ecosystem, so startups, I just mentioned it already. So on the one hand, we are running startup incubation programs. We are also an early stage investor, so we invest into each of these startups that join our programs. On the other hand, we are working very closely with corporates. So for corporates, we are really an open innovation arm, I would call it. They look for startups, new ideas, how to innovate, and we go out and scout for these startups and match them. Sometimes it's also about investment. So many of our partners, they also have an investment arm, so they invest into these startups. There are various ways we work with our partners. And then we are ourselves an investor, but of course we work very closely with other investors, as one does, of course. And then we have a strong mentor pool focused around financial services. And we work also with partners, including Microsoft for Startups, Google, AWS, very strong partners that provide especially perks to our startups and access to their ecosystems. I mentioned already, we work with corporate partners. I think there's something wrong that shouldn't be blacked out. But just to name a few, we work with Franklin Templeton, we work with a Swiss stock exchange, we work with a private bank, Julius Baer, just to name a few partners. In the blockchain space, we also work with Clayton Foundation, or we work with Ripple as well. But yeah, enough said about us and Tenity. Now I really want to give you some insights about the startup trends and developments in Southeast Asia. First things first, I mentioned it, we focus on FinTech, and we focus for FinTech for a reason. So in Singapore, the top 10 verticals based on equity fundings are listed here, and you can see FinTech is about 1/3 of all the deals that were made last year. These are numbers from last year, were in the FinTech space. Followed by e-commerce, a very strong area as well. Of course, e-commerce really catching up in Southeast Asia with a lot of investments out of China actually, to just Lazada to name one that got big funding and is expanding across the region. Gaming is a big topic as well, so really interesting as well. And then software and IT, the whole kind of drive for digitization in Southeast Asia is right now really fueling, and we have a lot of funding in that area. And maybe the last one I want to mention is health tech. Also health topics is a big up and coming topic for Southeast Asia. And it's more or less the same in terms of deal volume and deal value. Of course, FinTech really leading there with 5 billion having raised last year. Here, no surprise, looking at unicorns in Southeast Asia, and with a big spike last year, 2021, 2 years ago already. Big spike, of course, with all the funding that poured into the region and in general into startup funding. So last year, of course, it went back, but if you look at it actually over the last 10 years, you can still see the trend is continuing. There are more unicorns that are born in Southeast Asia. That's something I think we are very bullish about. In terms of funding volume, just to have a bit of a perspective how much money is flowing into Southeast Asia or ASEAN as a region, we have about 5 billion that went into the ASEAN region. That's about a fifth of what, for example, North America is raising, or a fourth of the European funding. But still, I think it's significant. It's 7% of the entire fundraising in the fintech space that went into the ASEAN region. In terms of stages that got invested, I think interesting here is to see the trend. If we look at 2020, about more than 64% went into early stage, and only about a third, less than a third, went into later stage. I think that trend reversed. So last year you would really see more startups in the later stage that got funded. And why is that? Of course, now investors are taking a bit of the safer bets where they really see a path towards profitability. Hence, they're investing more into these startups that are in the later stage. Now I want to really break it down, because one thing one has to be aware of when we talk about Southeast Asia, it's not one country. It is various countries with various regulations, different languages. It's not as straightforward as entering another market where you have a very homogeneous culture and language and landscape. So here what's happening is actually that about, in terms of funding amount, 43% last year went into Singaporean startups. And another third went into Indonesian startups. But now I think I want to mention something, because Singapore actually has only 5.5 million inhabitants. So it's really small. And that means these startups that set up in Singapore, they are often also operating in the region. Or maybe they're fully operating in the region, but they have set up their holding structure in Singapore. Why are they doing that? I think you explained it really well why they do that. It's much easier for startups to raise funding from global VCs. So if you're setting up in Singapore, you're much more attractive often to international VCs. Some of the VCs actually, they cannot even invest into Indonesia, Vietnam, just because of KYC reasons from their fund. So a lot of startups that we see have international founders. They come to Singapore, they set up their company, and then they are obviously doing well, and they're getting funded. So I think take that with a grain of salt, but these startups are in Singapore registered. Indonesia has a very big market. I can see why that's happening. That's really happening then in Indonesia. And then the other countries are basically more or less one digit, where we have Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, much smaller in terms of the fundraising. In terms of the deals, funding deals by country, it's even bigger. So 55% are Singaporean startups last year that raised funds, and also again about a quarter that raised that money in Indonesia. So talking about fintech, what kind of startups do get funded? And I think here again we have just a great example of an embedded finance startup that was mentioned before. So embedded finance being a very, very big topic in Southeast Asia, and then also Web3. Web3 has been very, very attractive in the past few years, 2 years, I'd say, 3 years. So we can see actually the majority last year was raised from cryptocurrency startups. This could have been token investments. Singapore, of course, has a lot of startups in that space. Vietnam also quite attractive in terms of crypto. Indonesia, Philippines, I'd say. And then alternative lending is the other big bucket. So here we are really talking about SME lending. We're talking about buy now, pay later. These solutions are very very much in demand in Southeast Asia. And then additionally, blockchain in financial services is another big topic. Of course, maybe you've seen it in the news. All the corporates are really exploring blockchain as a technology to be adopted within financial services. So there's a lot of investments that go into that. But I think really important still is payments. Everything starts with payments. If you look at kind of up-and-coming countries and what kind of fintech funding they get first, it's usually always payments. So really setting up these payment rails, it's still a very, very attractive space in Southeast Asia, and a lot of startups manage to get funding. So I just want to give a bit of more background on embedded finance, because that's such a big topic in the region. So embedded finance is really like the integration of financial services within the products and infrastructure of a non-financial entity. Basically, any app that you're using nowadays has maybe a wallet. Maybe when you're buying something in an e-commerce store, in an e-commerce app, you can buy the insurance coverage for the product directly by buying the product through the app. So these kind of services have really taken up. And we have different areas. So we have the lending space, of course. Here again we're talking about buy now, pay later being a big application, and that managed to penetrate a lot of apps. Then banking, of course, here we're talking about debit card, credit cards that are integrated into these services. It's a bit small, I agree. Insurance, embedded insurance, a very big topic. Traditional insurers really work very closely with these enablers, tech providers, to integrate with these up-and-coming startups that are providing some digital service. So I mentioned it before, e-commerce stores where you can directly buy a coverage for a product that you're buying, or maybe an app related to, for example, a car marketplace where you can directly buy the car insurance on that app. So these are very attractive solutions, because for an insurance company it's extremely attractive because these apps, they have the distribution to the end customer. So it's ideal for them to partner up and embed their insurance product into that solution. Investing, of course, the other attractive space. Again, we're talking about maybe wallets where you can, for example, when you're buying something, the whatever is there for the roundup to the next bigger number, you can save that, and then it is then directly invested. So these are great solutions as well. And then, of course, last but definitely not least, payments. Nowadays, basically any app you're using, a website you're using, there is some form of payment facilitated, and that's the other big angle where this embedded finance is playing an important role. I'll just show you quickly 4 examples, or I'll give you a few logos and with a bit of text if you want to take a picture. But examples from Southeast Asia, Settle is basically a startup or an app that Petronas in Malaysia has issued. So if you go and pump your car, you don't have to actually even get out of the car and go to basically put in something manually into some device. You can do everything from your car on the mobile phone. You can say which pump you want to, which gas you want to fill in at which pump, and everything is fully automated through your app. If you're using that app, you can earn reward points, and of course for Petronas, they know so much more about you going forward. So it's really a great product and great integrated product for Petronas, but also for the user. They can have everything served through Settle. Then Raise, I mentioned it. There are various solutions out there, investing solutions. It's also a solution that allows, for example, the roundup function where you're buying something and it saves the roundup amount and it invests it automatically. So it's really for people that have never invested, they can now start investing small amounts, and that's very attractive in Southeast Asia, where you still have and had a lot of people that are unbanked, underbanked. Atomy is really one of the largest buy now, pay later plays in Southeast Asia. Standard Chartered Bank invested 500 million in 2021 into Atomy, and they have 15,000 merchants integrated. And I think I don't need to explain buy now, pay later further. And then last but not least, we have Caro. Caro is a very innovative auto marketplace. It allows you to buy a car, it allows you to actually use the app and go to a car park and test drive a car. It will open automatically, so very, very nicely integrated, and you can buy your insurance in there, fully automated, very, very interesting new solution. So these are just a couple of examples. You see that really in Southeast Asia a lot. Embedded finance is a big topic. I think one more thing I want to mention is what you see in Southeast Asia are maybe more your B2C solutions and less of the B2B. If you're looking for a B2B solution, maybe you go other places. So B2C is in big demand because people are underserved in terms of banking and insurance. And yeah, all these startups are now really conquering that space and basically making these solutions available. But that would be it from me. Thank you so much. If you want to get in touch, I'm around, or drop me an email, or you find me on LinkedIn.